Welcome back, MTG Joe here. I'm back from vacation and we're going to get out a quick one today. The Metagame Challenge for Explorer is here on MTG Arena this weekend. Recording this like 15 minutes before. I'm going to go a little bit quicker through this one. My flight arrived I basically got home at 3:30 in the morning yesterday after about almost 24 hours of travel, and it is 10:45, so I haven't really slept much and I want to kind of get some sleep, but I know folks usually look for these, so gonna get it out early and then kind of go take a nap. But the third of the fourth metagame challenges, we've had a standard, we've had historic, explorer, and then timeless is the following week. Explorer is close to Pioneer, but not quite Pioneer, so we see some deviations. We're going to get the data from Untap.gg, what you see on the screen. If you want to use Untap to track your win rates, look at decks, link is in the video description. I'll paste and timestamp all these deck lists as well, so you can quickly jump to it. One thing to kind of preface, population for Explorer Best 3 is not the largest sample. I also went with the most recent week just to kind of capture the most recent meta. One thing with that, just to kind of keep in mind, some of the play rates, like the win rates, are going to be very high in some cases, but the sample's kind of low. So like 20 games could be just one person having a good run with it. So there's a couple decks that are not as established in terms of volume of games that we've seen, but are putting up good win rates that I want to kind of highlight there as well. Looking at popularity, Rakdos Vampires, Izzet Phoenix, Abzan Amalia, and Azorius Control are kind of like those four staples of the format. You'll likely run into some volume of Boros Convoke as well, all kind of piecing together where we're looking at in terms of the overall meta distribution. The Vampires being the highest right now at 16.9. So things like if you're in a green deck, pick your poison or things you're going to want. Edict style effects, stuff to get rid of Vein Ripper. Phoenix, you're going to want some sort of graveyard hate. And Abzan Amalia, either anti-life gain hate or ways to deal with small creatures either at instant speed to kind of break up the combo. Control, you're going to want like hand hate or just anti-control cards that kind of piece together in mind. If we look at popularity over time, like Vampires has been very popular since its kind of inception. It's a creature type that usually is popular, and with it being good, especially in the Rakdos shell. So it's kind of just surpassed the Rakdos midrange shell because it can do some like unfair stuff, but still have the core of the Rakdos midrange deck. Phoenix has also been increasing lately while we see a decrease in Azorius Control, thankfully. But I know as soon as I start the metagame challenge, it's just going to be control. So we are going to look Explorer Platinum to Mythic rank, 18,000 games. For context, if we move the needle to Diamond, we drop 8,000 games. So I'm going to look at this from there. I'm going to start off not like in the highest order. We could see like Rakdos Goblins at 90% win rate. We'll cover that in a sec, but I'm going to kind of do the tentpole decks and then we'll kind of take it from there. So Abzan Amalia, this version of the list is at 79%, 24 matches. Again, not the highest win rate, but gives you a sample of the deck. So the deck itself, how it works: Amalia, Benavides, Wild Growth Walker, and anything that gains you life. You gain a life, which triggers Amalia. You explore, which then triggers Wild Growth Walker, which gains you 3 life. And then you basically do the loop until Amalia gets to 20 power, wipes all the board. And so you gain like big chunks of life and a sweeper style effect that kind of works in that regard. Notably, if Amalia's life goes over or if the Wild Growth Walker gets indestructible, it's an infinite loop that draws the game. The version here is now introducing Fauna Shaman. I saw someone on Twitter posting how they were like testing variants of this with Fauna Shaman in there to help tutor up pieces, as well as Extraction Specialist in there to kind of rebuy some stuff. I've seen versions with upwards of like 2 Skyclave apparitions. Sentinel attacks nicely into like Wandering Emperor. So basically you just assemble your combo with like Court of Calling, Collected Company, and then you can return stuff back from your graveyard with Return to the Ranks to kind of rebuy your combo elements. This one's got a few more pieces in terms of the Selfless Savior in here, as well as like Aetherflux Reservoir is kind of the alternate win condition of the deck. You could just deal 50 damage to your opponent that way there. Sideboard's just got like various types of removal, artifact enchantment hate, protection with Tamiyo's safekeeping, more thought seizes where needed. Night of Dusk's Rose is the anti-life gain measure. So that one there, I can just see why this is not loading the images. Let me see in the meantime if I go to Amalia here. So Knight of Dusk's Rose is another way to kind of shut off the life gain kind of synergies with it. So there's different ways to kind of look at it in that regard. Like that's kind of the hate piece you'll see in some of the sideboards. So kind of going from there, the one thing with this deck, looking at it really quick, there's no graveyard hate. So I would probably look to get some pieces of graveyard hate. In all honesty, I kind of like this version better. So I'm going to do a quick switch for you. Sometimes we just look and we update on the fly. So kind of same concept. No Thoughtseize main, just increasing like the volume of threats. Voice is good against the control decks at times, just because it kind of forces them out of flash range. Fauna Shamans at 2 seems reasonable. I would probably trim the Aether Flux and play the full company or the other copy of Extraction Specialist. The sideboard looks much better. Fatal Push is just cleaner. Thoughtseizes. Remorseful Cleric's very good against like Graveyard Hate. Your Knight of Dusk Shadow in there. Redain for big mana spells as well. So I think I like this list a little bit more. It's a little bit cleaner. Izzet Phoenix. So Phoenix, the core is the same. There's slight variations along the edges. What you'll usually see, this one's at 75% win rate, is Ashiok Dream Render, either in the main or in the side at some cases. This here allows you to exile your opponent's graveyard while also milling yourself, so it's good in the mirror. It also shuts off your opponent's ability to search, so Amalia Combo can't court a calling, for example. The core of the deck is to put cards into your graveyard, most likely, or intending to be like Phoenix, cast 3 instants or sorceries, bring it back, and then the bird's the word. Ledger Shredder for kind of a fair game that's not relying on the graveyard. Picklock Prankster helps you mill while also putting instant sorceries into your hand. The Lightning Axe is scalable removal that lets you pitch the Phoenix, and then you have Treasure Cruise as a way to refill your hand for as little as 1 mana. Sideboard here, just interaction spells, removal against Graveyard Hate. You can shift into Young Pyromancer. This version's on Crackling Drake. You'll sometimes see Fable the Mirror Breaker there. Just kind of disruption pieces kind of mixed into there. You're a little soft to some Graveyard Hate while you bounce. You could play something like a Braid if you want. That's an option there. I personally don't like Anger the Gods in a Phoenix deck. I would play Brotherhood's End. The reason being, like, you don't want your Phoenix to be exiled. I feel like it's worse for you. And Brotherhood's End also incidentally could just hit artifacts in a pinch. And there are some artifact decks that do see some play, like the Ensoul artifact kind of strategies. So I would make that change personally. And I've seen some versions, 3 Pyromancers, 2 Fables in place, but it's just kind of differentiating your threats post-board so you're not as reliant on the graveyard itself. Then go to Rakdos Vampires, 75% for this one. This deck's really kind of simple at its core. I play Sorin, I put Vein Ripper into play. My opponent goes, what? And then you just kind of beat down with a big creature. Sorin can Lightning Helix people with the +1 as well. And then just lifelink and put counters on it. Bunch of disruption, 5 discard pieces in the main, Fatal Pushes, Bitter Triumph, Blood Tithe Harvester, all service removal. Smuggler's Copter can help you draw discard kind of effects. Fable continuing to be an incredibly powerful busted card. And then Cavernous Souls helps in the control matchups because you can just make your vampires uncounterable. Honestly, even just like Preacher sometimes could just solo games against some of the decks. More hand hate with Duress, Needles for activated abilities, just a variety of removal options. Kolaghan's Command to rebuy stuff, Path to Peril as a sweeper for more aggressive decks, Extinction Event for bigger things, and then Leyline for the kind of control or the graveyard focus decks. Mono White Humans, 70.6%. So this one here, just human strategies. So Thalia's attacks, Copper Co Vanguard to make your thing stronger. Thalia's Lieutenant puts a bunch of counters on things. Version's a little bit higher on the 3 drops. Full set of Adeline, full Brutal Cathar, 2 Extraction Specialists, 1 Wedding Announcement main, which is kind of interesting. The full 4 Adeline seems like a lot. I would almost do 3 Adeline, 2 Wedding Announcements if you're going to go there, but Thraben Inspector, Recruitment Officer, hopefully. So just like a bunch of 1 drops. You got Kabir Takedown, could also be used as removal. Leveraging a lot of good utility lines here. Mutavaults, Chefnet Dune says it like an Anthem, Castle Hardened Veil to pump your, or to make tokens, the Ganjo as removal. Portable Holes removal, Graveyard Hate between Soul Guide and Rest in Peace, Redain for tax effects, Skyclave as removal, and then more wedding announcements in the grinder matchups. Usually any like the Rakdos, kind of any deck that has a lot of 1-for-1 removal, you can bring in the announcement. That usually helps. Boros Convoke 66.7%. So this version here got access to Novice Inspector. So it's kind of similar to the standard. So if you have the standard deck, you're pretty close on this one, to be honest. You're basically just going to need like Thraben Inspector, which is a common. Ornithopters in there is common. You need some of the lions, but the Boros lines are really flexible, back to historic, timeless, like one of the more reasonable mana bases, because you could also play like heroic and stuff like that. Resolute Reinforcements, just more bodies. Containment Priest has kind of some main board tech against things being cheated into play. This also is reasonable against like the Vein Ripper style strategies. Imidane's kind of the same concept of standard, but you also get Venerated Loxodon as another convoke creature that gets put counters on your stuff. Sideboard, just Deafening Silence versus the Phoenix matchups. Blue or white hate. Case is more removal. Containment Priest, kind of anything cheating into play. Also good against Amalia combo. Get Losses removal. Rest in Peace is Graveyard Hate. Guardian of Faith versus the sweeper decks. Moving on, we got Azorius Control. Azorius Control, again, another deck that's got a lot of different variants. This one is a Yorion one, but the core of it's the same. This version gives you access to temporary lockdown main against more of the aggressive decks. Verdicts in here, Farewells. This version's got a Dream Trawler main as a win condition, supporting with Teferi, Emperor, Shark Typhoon, and then just a bunch of counter spells, Absorb, No More Lies, Get Lost in there, March. Omen of the Sea in this version here because you could blink it with Yorion. A whole bunch of utility lines kind of scattered in there. Again, sideboard. Counter spells, Graveyard Hate, Ashiok for like tutor stuff. You could bring in Chromehost Seed Shark. You could bring in Hullbreaker Horror. The Summary Dismissal. Exile all other spells and counter all abilities. So I guess this is a way to kind of get around like Amalia. It's like Stifle, I guess. I don't know. Let me know if you know what this matchup would be used for. Seems kind of niche. Settle in there. They never play around. They'll never play around Settle until you settle them, and then they'll always play around Settle, and then when you don't have Settle, the Settle Wandering Emperor is like some mental warfare you can impose on your opponent, but just a lot of kind of removal options there. Narset's also really good against Phoenix, just shutting off their ability to draw cards. So then we go to Rakdos Goblins, 90% win rate. So what is this deck doing? What is Rakdos about it? Well, Rakdos for the black removal options, but Call of the Death Dweller in here. So this is what sometimes gets referred as Death Whirler. So Call of the Death Dweller returns a creature, returns up to two creatures with CMC 3 or less from your graveyard, basically combined. You put a Death Touch counter on one and a Menace counter on one. Well, with Chain Whirler, if you give it Death Touch, it deals 1 damage. That 1 damage is Death Touch damage, so you sweep your opponent's board. So that's the Death Whirler element. Cacophony Scamp can get in some damage. It also, if it has a Death Touch trigger, can ping and kill something. Prospector in there for mana. Battle Cry. So kind of like a whole bunch of Goblin synergies. Squeed to go wide. Fable the Mirrorbreaker, making Goblins incidentally as well. Really taking advantage of Cavern of Souls in this deck. You got Mutavault in there as well. Sideboard. Removal with Fatal Push, Hand Hate, Agatha Soul Cauldron for Graveyard Hate, but then also activated abilities. Notably, you can copy Battlecry Goblin, you can copy Skirk Prospector, you can copy, actually you can't copy Fable the Mirrorbreaker unfortunately, but give you some access to activated abilities, but also just counters, kind of mixing with hers. Go for the Throat in there. Blot Out as just removal, Obnixis for the grindier matchups, and then for artifacts, you got Goblin Trashy Boy kind of mixed into there as well. What I would probably say is either, so this deck doesn't really want Rampaging Ferocidon because you're making a lot of goblins, but the Knight could be good, the anti-life gain for the Amalia deck, because that could be a bit problematic in the matchup, because the Graveyard Hate's less reasonable, and then you're also just kind of relying on kind of piece removal. Mind you, Chain Whirler is pretty solid in that matchup. Then we have Mono Red Burn. This is an Abosh deck that's been doing pretty well. So everything is odd in this deck. So you got kind of a Wizards package with Lavamancer. So Spear is not a wizard, but Soulscar Mage is. So it's a little, you only actually have 8 wizards in this deck for the Wizards Lightning itself. So something to just keep in mind with that. Just a lot of burn, Monstrous Rage, Kumanos, Chandras for some card advantage, light up stage in there. This version is on 21 lands, which is reasonable. The 4 Den might be a little much, but it's pretty low curve. Sideboard, you have in the Festivities for the Convoke matchup, Grafdigger's Cage for enter the battlefield stuff, more Rages for like Control Mirror, or like Creature Mirrors, Needle for activated ability for Grandier matchups, you have Case, Ferocidon for anti-life gain, and then Soul Seer as removal. Moving on, we go to Mono Black Waste Knot. So I think personally the just Mono Black Midrange deck is pretty solid. I don't like the Waste Knot deck, or at least the deck fully kind of built around Waste Knot, because it's a card that doesn't do much on its own, and it's like a turn 2 with you usually not getting any value. I think just playing Mono Black Midrange with Invoke Despair is much better. So I'm prefacing with that. Kind of the core, just a lot of removal options in here. You're just playing a kind of Mono Black control deck. You have discard effects that trigger the Waste Knot here. Akazat's on the top end's pretty solid. The end for kind of combo-oriented pieces. Shieldry kind of wins you the game there. You have Sunken Citadel kind of with a Field of Ruin Demolition Field package to blow up lands. You have Gyre Reach Sanitarium in this deck, which lets you draw. Each player draws in the discard. So even if an opponent's Hellbent, you still get them to force a draw discard with the Waste Knot as well. Also drains them with Shieldred. Sideboard, Hand Tape, removal, grind your card advantage, Kalidas for life gain, more Alcazats, things dying. Also trigger, they get exiled there. You have anti-combo hate, so just a bunch of kind of hate cards in there. Then we go to Simic Merfolk, it's a cool list. So this list here, you can kind of abuse the interaction of Deeproot Pilgrimage. So whenever one or more non-tokens you control become tapped, you create a 1/1 blue Merfolk creature with hexproof. So normally when you attack, it only triggers once, but with Kumano's ability, you can tap for like each instance on your opponent's end step to the first ability, and then just kind of get a whole bunch of army. Lord effect in like Vodayan Hexcatcher that also lets you be a counterspell. Deeproot Elite gets to put counters on things, which plays again nicely with the Pilgrimage. Sinotska, Benthic Biomancer lets you draw discard. Wind Robber as a way to kind of force your opponent's mill. It also provides you some card advantage. Tidebinder for activated abilities. You got the Mutavaults and Caverns in here with Eclectic Company Shell. Sideboard, just Graveyard Hate, protection, some counters. The Make Disappear is a little interesting here. I think in that case, I would rather just be on Negate. Just play a hard counter in that case. The bigger Lords, if you just need to scale your opponent, you can kind of tap down activated abilities. Mystic Subdual, you get to kind of take off the abilities of one of your opponent's creatures. So anything with like effects, Aether Sphere Harvester as like a life linker that's pretty cheap to accrue, and then just more Tashanas or Mystical Disputes. Opponent casts Sorin, minus is to put in the Ripper, you Tashana it, feels like pretty good value. 4-color Quintorius, release the Winds, the Fart deck. So 76% here. So this deck here has the weirdest curve you'll ever see, but it's using split cards and stuff like that. Core of what you want to do with this deck is get to 5 mana and either cast Quintorius or get to 6 mana and cast Trumpeting Carnosaur. If you do, you'll cascade into any of these effects. So basically the core is like you keep copying Quintorius, and with Spark Double or Release the Wind to exile Quintorius and then recast it for 0 mana. So you just kind of get that value there. You have things like Elemental Masterpiece, Creative Outburst, Magma Opus, just a bunch of ways to make treasures that you can also then flash back the Outburst and Opus with the Torrential Gearhulk. You have Bedeck Bedevil as removal, and then just Land Hate, Consign as a way to kind of have bounce and then discard as well. Cavern for Dinosaur or construct can also give you some protection. Hornlock Whale is more removal. Because of how you're configured, you have a Karuga Companion, Shark Typhoon. In the control matchups, you can just make big sharks, kind of cast that way. Thought Distortion for control is also reasonable, and Vanquish the Horde for the more aggressive decks. And then lastly, Dimir Control, the Nassif special. So this one here, it's a blue-black control deck. The big kind of upgrade is Deadly Cover-Up. Just having an unconditional sweeper, with then also has the upside of just exiling stuff. Confounding Riddle's another new card seeing play here, kind of the Supreme Will style effect. The Deuce also seeing play here. Basically, you're going to be like Fatal Pushing, Thought Seizing, just controlling your opponent. You're winning through Gear Hulk or Shark Typhoon kind of mixed into there. And there's probably one Hollow Storm Giant, one Hive of the Eye Tyrant, and your opponent just going through chaos of why are you killing everything. Is there the memory? No, there's no memory Narset lock that we've seen in some cases. Just a bunch of different removal options. Sweepers, Chromos Seed Shark, post-board could be brought in against aggressive decks. You have Kalidas, Kaido for the Grandier matchups as well as the control mirrors. You could bring in the 4th Supreme or Shark Typhoon as well. So that's pretty much it. I'm going to try to do a run with some decks. The deck I was playing a lot in Best of One. I just haven't had a chance to build out a sideboard. Is the Creativity Gearhulk deck. Kind of configured it for Best of One. I'm 16-4 with it in Best of One. I think this is a reasonable deck as well. Should be some gameplay on it on my YouTube channel, but the big thing is if you're playing this deck, play Voltage Surge over since it can hit some of the vampires. The vampire matchup's pretty tough right now, at least in Best of One. And with it being so popular, I don't know if this is the best time for it, but in Best of One, this deck basically beats up on most of the decks. It just has a hard time against... It's really good against control, decent against all those small creature decks. It's just a vampire deck that's pretty tough, all things considered. And oddly, I ran into the Waste Not deck that went Thoughtseize, Liliana, and then just, yeah, it beats you. You're in your control deck and they triple discard you on the first 3 turns. Kind of gets you that way there. That's it for the week. Good luck to those playing. If you do get 7 wins, drop it in the comments. Thanks for watching.